welcome back to another episode of Sweet Tea and Coffee. I am your host, John. Along with me today is the lesser co-host of the show, the one and only, the Blake Russell.
That's it, the lesser.
Well, I got to say, guys, it's my privilege to be on this show for the last month or two or three or four or five, and I am sadly getting kicked off the show because our lovely Kendall is coming back from his sabbatical and will be taking this place. I don't know how often you'll get to hear from me anymore, but I trust that this show will be in good hands. Mostly because today's guest is not only a friend of mine, but it is my wife. Today we have the one and only Meleena and Renee James.
Wait, how many names was that just then?
Meleena and Renee James.
That's a lot of first names.
Yeah, it's really just Meleena and James, but sometimes we call her Renee. So,
It
long
gets
story.
thrown in there.
Okay, well, this will be fun.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Here we go. All right, well, I'd like to say again, welcome to Sweet Tea and Coffee. I didn't get my intro in, so I'm getting it in right now. We have Meleena James today, and I always really enjoy having spouses on the show. I guess it was a few months ago we had our wives, and that was an interesting time. Most popular episode. So,
wow.
you know.
That's a high standard. That's a high bar.
That was one that me and Kendall, when we got done, we were kind of like, I don't know, that's very good. But apparently people loved it. So
I think they like your wives.
I think that's what it is. And that's the whole reason we brought Meleena on for your last show, to just try to help out just a little bit.
Yeah, they're tired of hearing from me. And so we brought in Meleena. So Meleena, we're glad you're here, and let's get right to it. Meleena, let's learn a little bit about you. Now, this is the weird part because
This is the moment where Meleena's getting really uncomfortable. Y'all aren't in the room with us right now, but I can just feel it.
she's doing great. So I'm actually not going to ask the questions today. I'm going to let Blake ask the questions because I already know all of these answers, and so it'd be kind of strange to ask you questions of things I already know. So, but I'll start us off with an easy one.
You just break the ice here.
Break the ice. Just break the ice. Okay. You have to pick one Christmas movie to watch every year, and you could only watch one Christmas movie. So it's the only movie you get to watch, but you have to watch it every year. Which one do you choose?
Ooh, that's really hard. Okay, I will probably say Elf, but not because of all the reasons people would say Elf. Because it's not that I enjoy the movie. Like, I do enjoy the movie. But what I really love is I love watching the movie with my mom.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's like you have to experience watching Elf with Carol Ordway because it's an experience. She laughs the whole time, like thinks the whole thing is hilarious. And so that's like a thing that I look forward to every year is just watching Elf with my mom. So I can't get rid of that.
No, that's good. Yeah, there are those movies that you enjoy watching with other people, or like I have those movies with my parents or like with my dad. When my dad gets cranked up, it's like you're not going to stop. He's going to be laughing and be tickled
and it
the
just
entire
makes
time.
you laugh.
Yeah,
and then
it's
it
just
makes
it's
the
just
whole
fun.
movie better.
Yeah,
it's like,
just fun.
this is actually great.
Well, Meleena's here. Meleena has, you've been at this church for a really long time. So when did you come to Fredonia Hill?
I first showed up at Fredonia Hill in 2012.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was,
So that puts us at 10 years.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I know. Yeah, it has been, it still doesn't feel like it's been that long. Like, it does not feel like I came to Nacogdoches 10 years ago.
Right. So was that like your freshman year of college?
Yeah.
And so you go looking for a church. How did you find this one?
Oh, man. Yeah. So I got here my freshman year and really came to Nacogdoches because I was traveling with a ministry in Louisiana all through my junior and senior year of high school. And so the only reason I came to SFA was because it was the closest in-state school to Shreveport.
Gotcha.
I really could care less of like what was actually happening at the
Yeah.
university. I didn't come tour it. I really barely even went to orientation. I really just coming to Nacogdoches to be a part of this ministry, and got here and didn't really know if I'd be involved in a church locally because that ministry traveled on weekends. Mm-hmm. So we would go and do stuff on the weekends. So I was like, well, I'll be here or there. So finding a church was not like a big deal.
Right. Yeah.
But I got here and that ministry ended within 2 months of being in college. So it was like, oh, well, now I'm here.
Now
and
what?
What am I doing? And so my best friend and I, Kelsey, who we actually met at Fredonia Hill the first Sunday, Lumberjack Sunday, we met here. And we kind of had gone to some different churches, and we would debrief after every time you'd go to church. And we just found our conversation was, well, did you like the teaching? Did you like the worship? Did you like the people? And we're like, gosh, this is annoying. Just how we're rating churches on this scale. And we're going to be doing this forever. We're not ever going to find the perfect one, or we're not ever going to find exactly what we're looking for, or what if the teaching was just bad this Sunday? What about the next Sunday?
Sorry.
Or what about the worship was just off this week? And so we kind of came to the table and was like, okay, how can we do this better? So we came up with this great plan of essentially interviewing the college pastors. We were like, okay, we're going to just see what is the heart and vision of the churches and just figure out where do we fit in best. And we didn't really realize how much that was going to catch people off guard. We thought it was man, this is great. Probably a lot of people do this.
Yeah.
And so we just approached, we emailed college pastors. We approached them when we ran into them, hey, can we set up a time to talk with you? And the crazy part, only 2 people responded to that. So it made our decision process really
a lot easier.
A lot easier. It was okay, well, there's 2 churches that are kind of in the running.
Right. Yeah.
And one of those being Kendall. So he has this great story of where he just says, we approached him and, interrogated him for an hour. And
he says that y'all cornered him in Guest Central.
Yeah, but it kind of was that.
I mean, I could see that being that.
Guest Central really lends itself to being cornered.
Yeah, it's just a giant corner, that room.
Yeah. So we just kind of said, hey, we'd love to meet with you and get to hear about your college ministry. What is Fredonia Hill about? Yeah. We're freshmen here wanting to get plugged in. And so he kind of just was like, okay, well, do you want to come over for lunch today? And I was like, okay, sounds great. Yeah. So we just went over to his house and with Lindsay and just got to sit and hear, hey, this is what we believe college ministry is about, what that looks like at Fredonia Hill. And at that time, the college ministry was a lot smaller, had just started. Kendall hadn't been here for longer than a semester. And so we, at that point, we just kind of said, okay, we want to be a part of this. We want to be a part of what God is doing here and want to be a part of bringing other college students into this. And so I would just say that's what Kelsey and I, after that meeting, it didn't take very long for us to be like, hey, we're all in here.
Right.
And that's what college was, I think, for me, is I was in Nacogdoches, but also my call was to Fredonia Hill and was to being a part of this local body, whatever that looked like, whatever that was, I was there. And it was just really sweet. And so I joke about when I graduated college, I should have had all the Fredonia Hill tassels. That should have been, because I didn't do anything else. I didn't do any other gloves. I didn't do I did school.
I get that. So I just saw photos of college students that were graduating and they had all the things. But by the way, I didn't realize we had so many smart college students at Fredonia. I looked at that and I'm
They're
like,
smarter
oh my
than
goodness.
we used to be.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. But I was the same way. It was all I did was go to church and do church things, in college. So that's really interesting. All right, let's put a pin in the college ministry thing for just a minute because we'll come back to that. Let's back this thing way back to the beginning and go back to what was your childhood like? What was that like?
Man, I had a really sweet childhood. I have just really great parents, but not your typical, I feel Southern Belle
That's
upbringing.
True. Your parents are not from this area originally.
No, they're from the Northeast, and they didn't become believers until their 40s or 50s. And so I feel I've watched my parents figure out how to follow Jesus. And I can, there's markers of shifts in our home that took place. Like I remember my dad used to listen to like really crazy music, and there was just like this moment that we just stopped doing that, and it was noticeable. Like there was a moment of like us starting to learn how to pray for meals, and that wasn't something that we did before. And my mom started like doing jail ministry, and that was like just her learning how to do that. I remember like her in summers, it was like she just kept reading books about who Jesus was, and started integrating that into conversations with us. But that was when I was in like 3rd, 4th grade. And there was also a lot of tragedy that was happening in my family at that time, where like family members were passing away, and I kind of attributed that to like, okay, this shift in our house was kind of like, I'm going to follow Jesus, but don't really know what that means. This is really scary. And so, but I've always been like, I'm going to be a good kid in front of my parents. And my rebel years were definitely like middle school. It's crazy. My rebel years were early, and I'm kind of thankful for that. But I just started hanging out with the wrong crowd, and but even then, I still was like not as bad as they were, and that was the grace of God. Like that was the grace of God that allowed me to kind of be like, hey, that's probably a bad idea. But my parents, even in that, like, gave me a lot of freedom, trusted me a whole lot, and gave me a lot of freedom and let me hang out with those kids. I feel like in school, I had teachers that like pulled me aside and was like, hey, you need to stop, stop hanging out with them. And I was just kind of like, no, it's fine. I'm fine. Like, I'm not going to do anything super silly. And, but my parents just kind of invited those girls into our home. And those girls had like really, really broken homes, and really hard spaces. And I just feel like my parents became family to them.
That's awesome.
And to me, it was never like our home was never closed off to them. It was just like brokenness was welcome. And I see that like even in my mom's jail ministry, like her heart was always for the women that had made mistakes and hadn't had it all put together. We'd be watching the news, and she'd feel compassion for the person that did something wrong. And that, like, I look back and I realize, like, oh, there's so much of why I am and think the way that I do now.
Right, that was being formed in those moments.
Yeah, we're being formed in those moments of, like, every single person that I was told not to hang out with. My parents were like, no, bring them here. Like, let me love them here. And the cool part is, like, they still have relationships with those girls, and still love those girls. And it's like their lives are super crazy still. But I grew up in that, and I didn't really become a believer, or find Jesus or commit my life to the Lord until I was going into my sophomore year of high school. So I had started kind of just like getting into some of the things that those girls were getting into and doing those things. And found myself one morning after spending the night at one of those girls' houses, seeing, like, for the first time, seeing the brokenness, for the first time seeing wickedness for what it was. It wasn't, everything else was like masked in fun and partying and like, this is good and this is what the world has to offer. But if you look at the day after, it's gross. It's ugly. And I had never really seen that. I had never experienced that. And now I know that was the Holy Spirit, like removing, like the scales on my eyes to see what was actually taking place. And like, this is what the world has to offer. And I just became like sick to my stomach. I was like, oh, like this is what the world says is to look forward to. This is like all the good things. Like, this is what you're trying to do. This is what's fun. This is, and saw it and was like, no, this is actually like not at all. Like, this is gross. And kind of makes me want to vomit, and there was like shame and guilt that was all built into that, but I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know. So my thought was just like, okay, I'm just going to stop doing those things. But but I'm not going to stop hanging out with these people. I'm just going to like be there, but not do the things. And started doing that. But even in that, I think I saw brokenness even more and more and more, and the wickedness and the evil and like the lies and the deception and the all of those things that were taking place. And so I ended up that summer, my mom was like, hey, you're going to go. She was really great at just sending me to things, whether I liked it or not. And I was really great at going. I loved having fun. I loved going on adventures. I was always the kid was like, yeah, okay, I'll go. Like, send me wherever.
Right,
And I'm excited about going. And so I went to camp, and it was called Pig Camp. And
I don't even know. I want to know how it got that name.
I know. It's because it's in Arkansas. So, but it was
okay. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, it was in Arkansas. And they had pigs that just roamed around the camp. And what they did is they hosted camp all summer long for families that couldn't afford it. And so our group was coming to do a mission trip there to get the camp set up for the whole summer. But they had pigs. That's like how they did their livelihood was took care of pigs.
Okay.
But there was an event about pig wrestling. Like I learned how to hog-tie at this pig camp. Yeah. Don't mess with me. I can.
There's the first interesting fact out of the interview today is that she can hog-tie.
I've
never seen it actually happen.
I have pictures. Go look on Facebook. Like it's there.
I've still never seen it happen.
Yeah. But went to pig camp, and I think it was the first in the herd. So the ministry that I traveled with my junior and senior year kind of came and led that camp.
Yeah.
And I think it was the first time that I interacted with people that genuinely loved Jesus. Not because it was their job.
Okay,
You know, like there's a difference. It's like I interacted with believers, but it was like it was like those leadership, they were my youth pastors or they were, but it was like these people they just genuinely loved Jesus because they loved Jesus and not because it was their job or because they had to and it was different, and they cared about me and they cared about every other person and like pursuing them and like meeting them where they were at. And I was kind of like, this is different. But I was there with my friend Ashley, and we were like, did not really want to have anything to do with the Lord. Like Ashley was very adamant about like not Jesus.
Right.
Didn't want to. So we kind of like dodged them. Like we were the too cool for school kids, just let's dodge them. But that one night, Chip, who was the leader of the ministry, shared the gospel again. And I had heard it a lot before then. And I think like there were moments where I kind of was like, okay, I think I'm a Christian, but I'm not really. Like there's something different in my life that's missing. It kind of just depended who I was talking to, if I like claimed Christianity or not. But in that moment, I feel like the Holy Spirit like met me and was just kind of connected the dots of like brokenness, of like sin, and was like, okay, this is what sin is. This is what you've seen in the world. This is like what the brokenness that you've seen. And this is like life and abundant life of following me, and that there is more here. And it is actually good, and it's not fake, and it's not just something that people talk about, and it's not just being able to say the right answers to Sunday school lessons. Like it's more than that.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's different. Like I thought I was just supposed to like show up to church every Sunday. I thought I was supposed to just have all the answers. I thought I was just supposed to be faithful to like coming on Wednesday night.
Checking the list.
Checking the list. But like how, like, no, Jesus like interacts with your everyday life and like radically changes how you live your day to day. And I was like, oh, that's something that I want to like give my life to. And so kind of gave my life to the Lord in that moment. And I tell people like from that moment on, I feel like God has not allowed me to step out of ministry. Like you're like, how are you where you are right now? And I'm like, man, literally
it just kind of
like it's like everywhere I turn, God is just like, here's the next thing, here's the next thing, here's the next thing. And so with that, kind of gave my life to the Lord, came home and told my parents like, hey, I want to like go to Africa. and ride on these dirt bikes all over Africa. And it's going to be for 6 weeks, and I have to raise a lot of money. And so what do you think? And I was just turned 16 years old, and they're like, okay, like, we want you to go do that. And sometimes I look back and I go, man, my parents were crazy. Like, how in the world did they let me do all these things? And but so that whole year, as I was like learning how to follow Jesus and learning what that looks like, raised money to go, and then spent it was a total of 10 weeks. So I was gone all summer long in Zambia, Africa, and in the bush. And it was like encountered crazy stuff, just like witchcraft, encountered like miraculous healing, encountered just like things. And I think like that's really where I learned like the power of God, and like he's a God who performs miracles, and he is like it's just crazy. And also just like learned like God loves to have fun. And it is adventurous. Like I kind of tell people, I'm like, no, like following Jesus is really the most adventurous thing I've ever done in my life. It's like the funnest thing I've ever done. And and so came back from that, and it was kind of like at that moment where it was like, okay, everything I do is going to be about Jesus. But coming back was really hard. Coming back to America was really hard. It was a lot easier going than it was coming back, to be totally honest. Because my whole worldview had shifted and changed. And it was the first time like I interacted with orphans. And you just don't, like, you just see the world differently.
Yeah, that can be a tough moment coming back in and trying to figure out, okay, how are the things that I've experienced and learned, how does that integrate in with the way the world works here in the West? You know, that's a difficult, especially after being, what you said, 7 weeks, I think? Or,
it was.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It was a long time.
Okay, you glossed over something that I did have on my list that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Dirt bikes.
Yes.
Like, I know you have a history with riding dirt bikes or motocross or something like that. Tell us a little bit about this, because I'm interested in it. Because whenever I was in junior high and high school, I did a lot of this too. And so when I heard years ago that you did this, I've always been curious about it.
Yeah. So it's funny. I feel like I've always enjoyed like adrenaline and fast things. Like I'm like, I don't want to go on a hike. I want to ride something. Like
interesting.
You know, like it's like anyway. But so my best friend Ashley, who was kind of one of the ones that was not the part of the crowd that I should be hanging out with. Her family did dirt bikes and motocross and whatever. And so I just would go, and they taught me how to ride dirt bikes. And so that's where it kind of started, was just their whole family was into it, and I was all about it. I was like, this is so fun. Like, I love going mudding, getting dirty, like getting lost, and then trying to figure out our way back, and a whole lot of trouble. But it was so fun. And then when I this mission trip opportunity, like I was reading the description, I was like, oh yeah,
this is right up my alley.
This is exactly what I want to do. And so that's kind of how it all started. And but the reason on like that trip why we took dirt bikes is because we essentially went to villages that cars couldn't get to. So it was like you had to either walk or ride a dirt bike, because that was as big of the path that it was.
Yeah, it's just a footpath.
It was just a footpath. And so we were going, like we would ride 5 hours every morning to a new town, and then do...
That'll wear you out on a bike.
Yeah, I was 16 though. I was a lot
I guess
younger.
You can endure a lot more. Yeah,
it's just kind of...
Yeah.
Didn't you guys have some sort of like code name for your group? Like, you weren't the Charlie's Angels, but you had...
Oh, we were the Orphans Angels.
Orphans Angels,
that was the
Y'all
name.
had like leather jackets.
We did. Because you had to. It's not like we were on dirt roads.
Yeah.
And so, but we were called the Orphans Angels.
I think you need to change your bio on your Instagram and to say Orphan Angels.
Yeah. But it was what I have pictures of like bridges that we had to go over, and now looking at it, I'm like, that's terrifying. Like, why did we ever do that?
So do you and John ever take any like dirt bike dates or anything, or are those days over?
Unlike my wife, I'm not a natural on a dirt bike. I spent my 16th birthday probably playing video games all day and watching Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I have a different set of skills.
Yeah. And I think, he's like said before, man, I like want to get a motorcycle or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Because he's like, I'm just going to get it on and floor it. And I was like, that's why.
Yeah, that's
like,
not a good idea. I've got a little, like a 1970s trail bike. It's about this tall.
For all of you who are listening on the podcast, he held his hand up about 3 feet.
Yeah, about 3 feet off the ground. So maybe sometime we need to organize something. You can come out and ride that and kind of get your bearings. If you gas it, it's not going to go it's not going to pop up on you or anything like that. So
That's
then,
good.
I've always envisioned myself, you're driving down the road and you see all these construction sites and they have these pounds of dirt or just mounds of dirt all along the street.
Yeah.
I always imagine myself like doing some extreme BMX, Jeremy McGrath motocross stuff on the outside.
So I mean, that is concerning. Maybe we shouldn't let you.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm like,
one of those green Kawasaki. I would floor it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so we kind of detoured on that a little bit.
We did go fun quick detour again.
Yeah.
We went because she's an adrenaline junkie. And so if anyone's listening to this podcast going, man, I want to get Meleena a gift, what do I get? Get her some sort of adrenaline junkie experience.
Yeah,
she'll love
like, driving the NASCAR experience, driving around, you go like 200 miles an hour.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
So we went jet skiing the other day, and I didn't grow up on a jet ski. I didn't know what I was doing. And the lady was like, I drive a jet ski? And we're like, yeah. And so we got on these jet skis, and I let Meleena start because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And she floored this sucker. I lost my hat in the first 5 seconds.
It can be kind of bumpy, you know?
I think she went 0 to 60 in like 2 seconds.
I did not.
And I'm not going to lie.
It feels like it on the water, I can tell you that. Yeah.
I was terrified. I thought for sure I'm dying right here, right now.
He's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. And I was like, you're fine.
So I think it's easy to understand that I'm more of the adrenaline junkie than Meleena. But anyways.
Well, let's get back into our story. So kind of flash forward. Obviously, you've had this experience, and ministry becomes pretty much a part of your life from here on out. And so let's jump even past the college years and just kind of talk about college ministry. And I mean, that's what your job is right now, is college ministry. And the crazy thing and unique thing and the wild thing that you do is you do it with your husband, which is got to be a unique experience in itself to do ministry with your spouse. So tell me a little bit about that, and don't hold back because John's sitting here. You can tell me how you really feel.
Yeah. So college ministry has been really sweet. I don't think if you would have ever asked me when I was even in college, would I see myself in college ministry long term? I think I would have said, I don't really know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, because I also didn't really know being called to ministry, what that looked like being a girl. Like, I just didn't know what that meant.
What are even the options or possibilities?
I was like, I know I'm not an administrative assistant. Right. Like, I just know that I'm not. I have dyslexia.
It's not your thing. Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to be the person that messes up the spreadsheet every single time. And I'm also not a children's minister.
Yeah.
Like, I can hang out with kids, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And I've never been the person that gravitated towards kids. And so, but loved when I stepped into college ministry as an armor bearer. It was, I feel like God has always given me opportunity to lead peers in kind of like the age group that I was in, which happened to be college ministry at the time. But then I just started developing, seeing oh, this is a really sweet season of people's lives. And I was graduating college, and God just I was like, okay, what do I do after college? What does this look like? That's always the question, what's next? And God just said, stay and be faithful to your church. And I was like, okay, God, I'm going to be like an intern forever. Like that, I was like, there's no place for me here.
I've been there.
It's like, I'm just going to be an intern forever. And cool, I'll do that for a little bit. And thankfully, again, I had incredible parents, and there wasn't a whole lot of pressure. They just kind of were like, okay, cool. And so I got a job working at a vet clinic. And
how did you get that job?
So we had a lady at our church that was the manager of the vet clinic, Heather Lazarine, was the manager there.
I forgot about that.
And I was like painting for VBS and with her, and she was like talking about the vet clinic. I was like, oh, is there like a job there? Like, do you pay kind of well?
So even your job that's not in the church, you got it while you're in the church doing something.
Yeah, for sure.
All roads lead somewhere back to the church at that point.
Yeah, and so started working there, and it was just kind of like this side thing that I was doing so I could do ministry.
Yeah.
And then miraculously, like I kind of tell people that I feel like my story is God doing more than I could ever think or imagine. And I think sometimes we think like, oh, it's just something really cool. But like I could have never thought, like literally could not have thought that I would be where I am right now. Like I couldn't have put the pieces together, couldn't have figured it out. And so when Kendall moved into executive pastor, asked me to step in as a college director at 22. It was
barely.
Out of college. I was like, you're crazy. I don't really know why this is a good idea or even if it is a good idea. Thankfully, I feel like he walked me through that year for a while, just was really helpful in putting the pieces together. But even in that, I feel like that was John and I's first year being married, and he had always done worship ministry. But in that year, I feel like God really started giving him a heart to do something more besides just worship ministry, to teach, to disciple, to walk alongside guys. And that was just like, I feel like a year of us kind of figuring out, okay, what does ministry for us together look like? And and so he like kind of asked Kendall, said, hey, I'd love to be involved in college ministry. And Kendall was kind of like, I don't really know if that's going to happen or if that could be
the position's taken.
Just kind of by me. And it was so awkward. I was like, John's like, hey, I'm going to go have this meeting. You want to come and do it with me? And I was like, no, absolutely not. Like, you're asking kind of for my job.
Yeah, this is weird.
So, but then like, even in that, as Kendall moved into lead pastor, he asked John and I to do this together. And I think both of us were a little nervous. Like, it was kind of like, okay, I have no idea what this looks like. And I've been doing, like, I was in college ministry now for about 4 years. I was like, I've been doing this for a while. Yeah. You have never done this, And so it was, I feel like, and as God has, like, walked us through the last 3 years of doing this together, it's been challenging. Like, I think I'd be lying if I said it hasn't been challenging, because we have more opportunities to, like, choose our flesh. Like, that's the only reason why it's more challenging is it's because, like, we do literally everything together. There's not ever really many moments that we're not together or we're not making decisions together, whether that be about ministry or our home or our family. But so it's like we have more opportunities to choose our flesh, but we also, I feel like, have more opportunities to be sanctified. Like, we've had more opportunities to really, like, press in and kind of go, okay, like, who has God made John to be, and who has God made Meleena to be, and how do these, like, go together to advance the kingdom? And that, like, takes a lot of dying to self, and that takes of even just kind of this not being like a power struggle between the two of us. And I think some days we do it really well, and some days we don't do it really well. But I think it's also sweet. I think a lot of college students have gotten to
experience that firsthand.
Have gotten to see marriage in a way that they haven't ever seen it before. And so I don't know if I would ever choose to do it another way. Like, I don't know if it's like, man, this is really hard, but at the same time, it's really good. And I've learned that, like, hard doesn't mean that it's bad. Hard, like, can still mean that it's good. And I think we equate hard to bad so often.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's kind of wrap up this segment with one thing. Somehow we have kept John quiet most of this interview.
I feel like I've just talked a lot.
Which is a feat in itself.
I'm just like, I have a lot of things that I...
This is normal for me. I'm not very talkative. I like to stay
Okay, well,
myself.
Before you give away too much, I want to ask you, like, what's an interesting fact that we need to know about John that maybe we don't know about? You know, like, is there... I know that he's pretty much an open book, but is there, like, something, a glimpse into John's life that maybe we need to expose to our listening audience?
Oh gosh.
John's just sitting
so
there like,
nervous.
oh gosh, what's coming?
Because there's 100 things you could choose right now.
Yeah, okay. So I think I'm always impressed
Okay.
with the amount of information he can like take in and digest in a day. Like he's almost like, I feel like he can be an expert. Just give him like a day and he can be an expert in it.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you ask him like, I'll ask him something and he can just like download this crazy amount of information. And I'm like, how do you know that? Like where did you get that from? And he's like, well, I was looking on da 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 da. And I'm like, where in your time, like in your day, how do you do this? Like, where does this come from? Because I do everything with you.
Yeah.
And so
Where did you soak all this in at?
Yeah, and so I've just always been, that's like something he is just impressively good at. So if you have like, if you need an opinion about something or you need like information about something or you need to solve a problem, John is your guy to
All right.
even hash it out with.
Everybody take note of that
Yeah.
and use him for that.
Yeah, I think the problem is I give my opinion too often, and that's when I get in trouble.
Just trying to figure out when to use it and when not to.
Yeah.
All right, John. So this is it. You mentioned at the beginning of the episode, this is it. This is the last part of your stint as guest co-host of the podcast. Kendall will be coming back soon. What do you want to say? Is there anything you want to say? I'm looking at the waveforms here on the podcast, and you really don't have a lot here. So I feel like since it's your last episode, we got to give you a little bit of time.
I'd like to speak to Kendall for a moment.
Directly to Kendall.
Kendall, it's been an honor filling your shoes, but I have to let you know, the audience of this podcast has come to expect an incredible amount of sarcasm.
This may have been a mistake already. I'm never thinking
It
about
has
it.
come to expect an incredible amount of biblical theology that I bring every podcast. And Kendall, I just want you to know, I might have filled your shoes, but I'm literally taking my shoes off right now. So you can know, these are your shoes to fill, buddy.
All right.
I can't wait for you to come back. Also, I'm just going to go back to drinking coffee as the superior drink versus sweet tea.
Okay. Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thank you, John, for your time here. That was great. Yeah, I don't have any more words to follow up with that. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping here. So this podcast is airing first part of January. We're actually going to take a 3-week break from the podcast. I know, I'm sorry. It's Kendall's coming back in, and we need a few weeks to kind of gather our bearings and get ready and just need a little bit of a break. So hang on for 3 weeks. We will be back with the next episode on February 1st with Kendall, and I'm sure he'll have all kinds of things to talk about, and then maybe occasionally we'll let John come back on too and say a few things here and there. So, hey, thank you for sticking with us this long, 29 episodes, and we are excited about what's to come. See ya.